All right, I think we're ready to start. Well, this is lovely that so many people have joined us today, not only here at Friendly House, but also over Zoom. And you're here at the Humanists of Greater Portland Sunday morning meeting. You're in store for a really special program today. It's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. My name is Helen Christians. I'll be your MC this morning. I want to welcome everyone here at Friendly House and certainly everyone on Zoom. HGP believes very strongly in freedom of speech, but the views expressed by myself, today's reader, the HGP members, our speaker, and our guests are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. You're here at a humanist meeting, and each of us, as a humanist, we each make our own creed. We don't have an established creed to be a humanist. So I will share with you mine. Humanism is a philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. It is a way of life that honors the fact that this is the only life of which we are certain and guides us to live an ethical life without relying on the supernatural. As humanists, we affirm the dignity and worth of all people and recognize the importance of cooperation among people simply for the possibility of peace and well-being when humans interact with respect for one another. Ann Henderson is our reader this morning. You always do good readings, Ann.
This has been attributed to teacher Ajahn Chah. Anyway, here we go. The cup is already broken. A monk had a beautiful, delicate teacup. His student asked him about the cup, and much to the student's surprise, he replied that the cup is already broken. What do you mean? Asked the student. The monk said, to me, this glass is already broken. I enjoy it. I drink from it. It holds my water admirably, sometimes even reflecting the sun in beautiful patterns. When I tap it, it has a lovely ring to it. But when I put it on the shelf and the wind blows it over, or I knock it off the table and it shatters on the ground, then I say, of course. When I understand the glass is already broken, every moment of it is precious. This is the essence of a mindful life. This is the way to view everything in the phenomenal world, our possessions, our loved ones, and above all, our own lives. This is the difficult art of living non-attachment. How can we love others and engage in our lives wholeheartedly without clinging and without fear? By knowing that the cup is already broken. The end is certain. This life of mine is already over. Everyone, everything is here and gone in one breath. And this is what makes life so dear, the precious precariousness of it all.
Oh, Ann. Thank you, Ann, for that beautiful reading and reminder that, yeah, life is precious, so precious. Okay, I would now like to introduce our speaker, who is April Pereira. She is the founding director of StorySpark Collective. She holds degrees from Keene State College and the University of Portland. As an author and community advocate, April is committed to empowering individuals and organizations to harness the transformative potential of storytelling. April's work at StorySpark Collective seeks to create a world where every voice is heard and valued. Today, she will be presenting Hidden Heroines, the women who shaped us without the spotlight. Welcome, April, and we're really looking forward to this program.
Thank you, Helen. Mm-hmm. So before we dive in, I want to take a brief moment to extend a huge thank you to all of you, the Humanists of Greater Portland, for inviting me to speak and share space with you. A very special thank you to Joyce, Helen, David, and the entire team for making this possible. It is a true privilege to connect with a community that is so deeply dedicated to human connection, shared values, and meaningful dialogue, because that is exactly what we're going to explore together today. So as Ellen said, my name is April Pereira. My pronouns are Ilea, they, and she. And I'm the founding director of StorySpark Collective. As a geographer and certified urban planner, my background spans community engagement, public policy, nonprofit leadership, and creative writing. Ultimately, it was through navigating these different fields and disparate fields that I kept coming back to a singular realization. You can plan the perfect built environment, but the true heartbeat of any community, the invisible engine that actually holds us together, is our stories. That conviction is exactly why I founded StorySpark Collective. We are a nonprofit dedicated to helping individuals and organizations harness the power of narrative to build stronger, more resilient, and more connected communities. When you look at a neighborhood through the planning lens, you quickly realize that stories aren't just a byproduct of a culture, they are its foundation. Stories expand the lens through which we view the world, creating room for growth, empathy, and genuine possibility. We operate on the understanding that every individual voice contributes an essential, irreplaceable piece to the mosaic of what it means to be alive. And when we look at history through that exact same lens, we start to see something fascinating. The grand architecture of our culture wasn't just built by a few famous figures under a spotlight. Its foundational tracks, it was built behind the scenes by creators, organizers, and storytellers who laid the foundational tracks we walk on today. But to truly understand how they did it, we have to look at how stories actually work. You can go that way. See, when people hear the word storytelling, they often picture something completely static. They think of sitting quietly in a dark theater, in opening a dusty book, listening passively to a lecture or audiobook. But at StorySpark, we look at it through a fundamentally different lens. To us, storytelling is kinetic. If you remember anything from high school physics, kinetic energy is the energy of motion. It's alive, it's dynamic, and it requires active participation. Storytelling isn't just a spectator sport. It's a physical, social, and creative collaborative game. We see this kinetic energy in action every single month at our events. We see it when neighbors are rolling 20-sided dice at our game nights, physically collaborating to build a fantasy world together. We see it when someone is literally stitching a narrative into a fabric at one of our creative labs. And when a writer is frantically scratching out the first messy pages of a novel at one of our workshops. In all these spaces, people aren't just consuming story. They're actively moving it forward, using their unique vantage points to build deep, radical sense of empathy across difference. This brings us to our unwavering core belief. Everyone has a story worth telling. Not because every single narrative reads like a hero's journey, but because the act of sharing our stories is how we actively construct the world around us. It's how we spark a community into motion, and in that space is where true connection lies. And as we are about to see, when everyday people treat storytelling as a kinetic revolutionary act, they can quite literally reshape history. So, my first question is actually all to you. For most of us, it's pretty easy to reel off a list of presidents, military commanders, famous inventors, high-profile activists, and celebrity artists. We naturally remember the figures whose names are stamped into our textbooks, immortalized in documentaries, carved in monuments, and celebrated all over pop culture. They occupy the center stage. But what about the people whose massive contributions never quite made it into the glare of that spotlight? What about the everyday educators who quieted the noise to shape a generation of students? The meticulous editors who acted as the behind-the-scenes catalyst for an entire literary movement? What about the community organizers who built powerful, life-saving networks of grassroots support long before the rest of the world was paying attention? What about the women who fiercely preserved stories, languages, traditions, and cultural identities in the face of relentless pressure to conform or completely disappear? Today, we're going to pull up a chair and spend some quality time with a few of those exact women. Now, I want to say first, it's not that these women are entirely unknown. In fact, every single one of them is deeply respected and championed within their own specific circles and communities. Some of them have received Google Doodles. Some of them have received mini documentaries about them. But they aren't household names, and they should be. They rarely pop up in mainstream other than those small snippets. They're rarely in our public historical narratives. Yet their creative influences is a living force that ripples directly into how we navigate the world today. And while it is a presentation about history, it is also fundamentally a conversation about memory. It's an exploration of active storytelling. It's an honest look at how our society decides whose lived experiences get a megaphone and whose are archived in silence. Most importantly, it is an invitation to completely shatter and expand our definition of leadership, influence, and creative impact. As we map out these journeys today, I invite you to think not just about the historical figures I'll be talking about, but about the real people in your own life and the neighborhood whose daily, quiet contributions might never get a standing ovation, but whose impact has profoundly altered your world. Because if there's one core truth I hope we collectively spark today, it's this: recognition and impact are not the same thing. Some of the most transformative, culture-shifting work in human history has happened far away from the standing ovations, but that impact have happened deep in the spaces where real life unfolds. So, with a playful spirit and a curious lens, let's dive right in. Let's start with a question historians and creators have been wrestling with for decades. Why do some people become iconic legends while others seem to fade into the historical background? At first glance, it's easy to make the lazy assumption that the folks we remember are simply the ones who made the single greatest contributions to the planet. But as someone who has worked in a museum, history is infinitely more complicated and competitive than that. The historical record isn't just a neutral file cabinet filled with objective clinical facts. It's an intentional, curated collection of choices. It's about the choice regarding what gets written down in a movement, the choice about what gets carefully preserved in vaults and archives, choices about what gets highlighted in school curriculums, and choices about whose specific lived experiences are deemed important enough to save. Throughout human history, those choices have always mirrored the existing structures of power. Historically, the individuals with direct access to political halls, elite educational institutions, dominant publishing networks, and massive cultural influence have held the keys to public memory. They got to write the script. As a direct result of that setup, a staggering number of vital, world-altering contributions have been systemically overlooked. This is glaringly true for women, for people of color, indigenous communities, immigrants, working-class trailblazers, and countless other change makers whose daily realities weren't seen as valuable or worthy of preservation by the dominant culture at the time. But there's another layer to why these hidden histories get lost. So many essential forms of leadership are, by their very nature, completely invisible to the standard metrics in which we measure importance. Think about the slow, patient work of teaching. Think about the intensive hours poured into mentoring. Think about the heavy lift of caregiving, the collaborative alchemy of editing, or the fierce logistics of community organizing. Think about the delicate art of preserving oral cultural traditions. These activities shape human lives in profound structural ways, but they don't exactly generate flashy, immediate headlines. As a broader culture, we have a bad habit of confusing high visibility with high importance. But let's correct the record right now. Visibility and importance are also not the same thing. Many of the extraordinary women we are exploring today didn't alter the course of lives through fleeting celebrity or manufactured personal branding. They did it through relentless, stubborn persistence and a deep, unshakable commitment to their craft and community. They didn't demand to occupy the center of attention. Instead, they focused entirely on building tables and creating space for others to pull up a chair. And when we intentionally do the work to uncover these stories, we walk away with a richer, truer, and infinitely more honest understanding of history itself. This brings us to a major inflection point for our talk today. And I promise I'm getting to the women. What does leadership actually look like? When most people hear that word, their minds automatically jump to a very specific traditional image of someone standing in the absolute front of a room barking orders. They picture a politician at a podium, a corporate CEO in a boardroom, or a military commander on a battlefield. They expect formal authority, loud visibility, and instant institutional record. But true leadership is a fluid, creative spectrum. The four women we are about to meet utterly upend and challenge every single conventional assumption about raw power and social infrastructure. Some of them intentionally operated behind the scenes. Some acted as vital cultural mentors or protected endangered collective memories. Others specialized in building the deep, unbreakable relationships and collaborative networks that allowed everyone else around them to truly flourish. Their lived stories are an active invitation for us to construct a much wider, braver definition of what it means to lead. A definition that explicitly honors radical care, collaborative creativity, and intentional community building. It's a definition that recognizes that profound human influence often moves quietly, working like a slow-burning spark rather than a sudden explosion. And honestly, that reminder is exactly why these narratives carry so much weight for us right now. In a modern culture that fixates on loud visibility, hyper-individualism, and curating a polished personal brand, these women stand as a profound counterculture reminder. Some of the most meaningful tectonic contributions on this planet happen when we stop trying to be seen and start investing heavily in the growth, safety, and creative well-being of the people around us. With that exact mindset, let's turn to our very first hidden heroine. Jovita Idár was born in 1885 in Laredo, Texas, right along the dynamic, complex lines of the US-Mexican border. She started her career as a teacher, but she quickly resigned due to the crushing inequalities, segregation, and poor classroom structure. She found that facing Mexican-American children. Realizing the limitations of the classroom structure, she made a bold pivot. She left teaching, picked up her pen, and joined her family's crusading Spanish-language newspaper, La Crónica. To truly appreciate the grit it took to make this change and do her job, we have to look clearly at the environment, which very much mirrors what we're dealing with today. The early 20th century was an incredibly dangerous time of intense, violent prejudice against Mexican Americans across the Southwest, who frequently faced segregation and lynchings carried out by the Texas Rangers. Today, we can call them ICE. The mainstream press regularly published highly biased, weaponized accounts, flattening entire communities into harmful, racist stereotypes. Jovita Idár knew that to survive, her community needed the absolute autonomy to tell their own story. In 1911, Jovita and her family successfully conceptualized and executed the First Mexican Congress, a premier Congreso Mexicanista. This historic framework unified activists, journalists, and government leaders from both sides of the border to systemically fight educational neglect, economic oppression, and civil rights violations. As a direct and logical growth of the Congress, Jovita founded and became the first president of La Liga Femenil Mexicanista, the League of Mexican Women. This group was a progressive feminist organization that provided free bilingual education to Mexican children, organized critical food and clothing drives, and fiercely preserved local cultural identity. I'm going to comment here that this group is also the group that launched Cesar Chavez's work that we are familiar with here. During the Mexican Revolution, she crossed the border to join La Cruz Blanca, the White Cross. She led recruitment efforts and personally put herself in the crossfire to care for wounded revolutionary soldiers. In 1914, while working for the newspaper El Progreso, She authored a fiery editorial protesting President Woodrow Wilson's decision to dispatch U.S. military forces to the border. When the U.S. Army and the Texas Rangers arrived at the headquarters to shut her paper down, Jovita physically stood in front of the door, blocking the entrance and refusing to let them pass, asserting her constitutional right as a free press. For that, she got a broken nose. In 1916, she successfully founded her own weekly news. I will say they did not close her down, however. In 1916, she successfully founded her own weekly newspaper, Evolution, directing its operational and editorial voice until 1920 to keep media ownership localized. Even later in life, moving to San Antonio, she founded a free kindergarten, became an active leader in the Democratic Party, and volunteered as a Spanish translator at the county hospital to help new immigrants navigate the naturalization process. She famously lived by the mantra, when you educate a woman, you educate a family. And apparently my slides are backwards. Jovita's daily grind wasn't glamorous or chasing clout. She was giving a community the tools to claim total ownership over its own collective narrative blueprint. We live in a modern world that is completely saturated with information. We have more ways to broadcast our thoughts than any other point in human history. Yet our daily debates around cultural representation, weaponized misinformation, and whose voices actually get a seat at the table are just as fierce and critical as they were in Jovita's era. Her legacy is a striking reminder that storytelling is never a neutral act. Stories can be used to calcify prejudice, or they can be used to completely dismantle it. Stories can erase a people, or they can brilliantly restore visibility. They can violently fracture a neighborhood, or act as the ultimate bridge for building human understanding. And that profound responsibility, the idea that our creative output carries a weight of care, is a common thread we're going to see as we walk through our exploration today. Our next hidden heroine invites us to turn our lens towards a different, equally critical question. Who gets the spotlight and the credit when an entire creative movement succeeds? Who in this room and online is familiar with the Harlem Resistance or Renaissance? An absolute explosion of creative power that permanently transformed American culture and Black lives. When we talk about that era, names like Langston Hughes, Kunti Kulin instantly dominate the conversation. But where'd they get their start? Who mentored and nurtured them into the literary geniuses today? Jessie Redmon Fauset was a phenomenal intellectual powerhouse from the start. She graduated with honors from Philadelphia's High School for Girls in 1900 as the school's sole African-American student. Denied admission to local universities due to her race, she earned a scholarship to Cornell University, graduating in 1905 as Phi Beta Kappa scholar with degrees in languages. After spending 14 years teaching French and Latin, sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois recognized her brilliance and asked her to move to New York City in 1919. From there, Fauset steps into the driver's seat of the NAACP. She becomes the literary editor of The Crisis, the official magazine of the NAACP. Her tenure is historically recognized as the most prolific, influential literary period of the magazine's entire run. During her time there, she possessed an uncanny ability to spot raw talent. She was the very first person to publish young Langston Hughes. She actively discovered, refined, and championed the foundational careers of Countess Cullen, Claude McKay, Jean Toomer, Nella Larson, and Arna Bontemps, the core of the Harlem Renaissance. For some reason I can't say that word today. In 1920 and 21, she helped found and served as the literary editor and primary co-author of the first monthly magazine of the NAACP, created explicitly for Black children, which was systemically designed to nurture racial pride and dismantle stereotypes in young youth. She became a crucial member of the NAACP delegation and traveled across Europe to represent the movement at the Second Pan-African Congress in 1921. Fell in love with Paris and ended up earning an advanced language certificate from the Sorbonne in Paris. She was also a prolific novelist. Frustrated by white authors writing flattening, inaccurate caricatures of Black life, the most famous being T.S. Stribling's Birthright, she published 4 major novels in a 9-year span. There is Confusion in 1924, Plum Bun in 1928, The Chinaberry Tree in 1931, and Comedy, American Style in 1933. Her masterpiece, Plum Bun, is highly acclaimed for exploring the deep intersectional realities of race, gender, and racial passing. This is almost 50 years before we even start talking about intersectionality. Standing directly behind almost every single successful artist is a network of people who quietly nurtured that talent, built the collaborative ecosystems, and held the door open. Fauset didn't just edit. She boldly shattered flat stereotypes simply by insisting on delivering the full, rich, messy spectrum of the human experience. She reminds us that that true leadership means focusing entirely on creating the perfect conditions for others to thrive. If we're being completely honest, every single one of us can probably look back and spot a Jessie in our life. The person who fiercely believed in our creative spark before we had the confidence to believe in it in ourselves. The one who saw raw potential and gave us bandwidth to grow it. Their names might never be held up in neon lights, but their profound impact continues to ripple outward through every single thing we create. That style of collaboration, that style of leadership deserves our highest recognition. Our next story pivots our collective lens to look at the powerful high-stakes relationship between active storytelling and the literal survival of cultural identity. Zitkála-Šá was born in 1876 on the Yankton Dakota Reservation in what we now call South Dakota. She grew up during a deeply dark and brutal era of American history, defined by federal policies designed to systemically force the total assimilation of Indigenous people into dominant American culture. One of the primary and most devastating weapons used to execute this forced cultural erasure was the boarding school system. Native children were violently torn away from their families, isolated from their tribal communities, and placed into rigid institutional environments explicitly engineered to strip away their Indigenous language, erase their sacred traditions, and completely obliterate their cultural practices. Everyone in this room is probably at least familiar with the broad strokes of this history, but it is nearly impossible to overstate the raw structural trauma of that reality. Imagine being a child abruptly severed from the safety of your family. Imagine being told that the very language you use to speak to your parents is unacceptable, shameful, and forbidden. Imagine being systemically brainwashed to believe that your entire ancestral heritage is something you must abandon, rather than cherish as your greatest asset. As a young girl, Zitkála-Šá, which means red bird, by the way, lived these exact horrors firsthand. But instead of allowing that institutional machine to crush her spirit or silence her voice, she made a revolutionary choice. She took those traumatic experiences and transformed them into raw, unapologetic stories. She enrolled in Earlham College in 1895 and instantly made a national name for herself as an essayist and poet, even winning major regional oratory contests against all white fields. She mastered the violin, later teaching music at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School while gathering firsthand data on its systemic issues. She became one of the first Native writers to publish autobiographical critiques in elite white publications like Atlantic Monthly and Harper's Monthly. She published Old Indian Legends in 1901 to safeguard Dakota oral traditions, followed by her seminal book, American Indian Stories, in 1921, forcing mainstream readers to confront the violence of assimilation. In 1913, she composed and wrote the libretto for the Sundance Opera, the very first opera written by an Indigenous creator. Her opera is insidious, and in every good way, because force, it weaves sacred band tribal melodies into classic operatic structure. She stepped into leadership roles for the Society of American Indians, serving as secretary and co-editor of the American Indian magazine, traveling the country to expose Bureau of Indian Affairs corruption and to fight for indigenous voting rights. Exactly a century ago this year, Zitkála-Šá co-founded and served as the first president of the National Council of American Indians. They're celebrating their 100-year anniversary this year. She successfully unified disparate tribes across the United States into a cohesive political front, paving the way for the Indian Citizenship Act. Upon her passing in 1938, her relentless courage earned her a final resting place in the immense final resting place of what we see as immense institutional honor. I want to be specific about that. She is buried at the Arlington National Cemetery. There is a lot of concerns about that now because she has been separated from her people, from her ancestry. But also I do want to note that their native burial grounds have mostly been destroyed through fracking at this point. What moves me about Zitkála-Šá's story, though, is her profound understanding of that storytelling is the ultimate act of cultural preservation. For marginalized and targeted communities, stories are never just casual entertainment to pass the time. They are the ultimate sacred repository of identity. They are the vessels that carry history, transmit values, and help a human being understand exactly who they are and where they belong in the universe. And I'm not going to say that that's true just for marginalized communities. The stories that we heard from our grandparents, regardless of what your ethnic background is how we keep those traditions alive. It's how our brains are designed to work. Our brains light up physiologically when we hear a story. But when a culture is facing immense systemic pressure to completely vanish, the act of picking up a pen, a paintbrush, or a needle to tell your story becomes an aggressive act of resistance. It is a brilliant, defiant way of shouting to the world, we are still here. Our experiences matter. Our history matters. And our future is absolutely non-negotiable. This is a vital lesson that extends beautifully to every single community that has ever been pushed to the margins. Throughout the course of history, when formal institutions completely fail to record the truth, communities have always relied on the power of decentralized storytelling to keep movements alive. When we create and tell stories, we are never just passively recording the past. We are actively constructing the future. Because as Zitkála-Šá knew, every single story that we fight to keep alive expands the rich range of human experiences available to the next generation. She understood that as a bone-deep truth. Her incredible body of work stands as an eternal reminder that storytelling can be a magnificent act of raw courage, and sometimes it is the ultimate act of pure survival. And now, my personal favorite, because I was lucky enough to meet Grace before she died. Our final featured heroine, she's my heroine. Our final featured heroine lived an absolutely legendary century-long life, and she spent decades deeply dissecting one of the most complex questions facing any society. How do communities actually create deep, lasting, meaningful change from the ground up? Born in Rhode Island to undocumented Chinese immigrant parents, Grace encountered systemic barriers early on. She earned a scholarship to Barnard College, graduating in 1935, and went on to complete her PhD in philosophy from Bryn Mawr College in 1940. Despite her academic brilliance, overt racism blocked her from securing a university teaching position. Undeterred, she moves to Chicago, took up residence in a low-rent community, joined the Southside Tenants Organization, and began her life's work organizing the marginalized. Alongside Marxist theorist C.L.R. James, She helped build a distinct philosophical framework that focuses heavily on localized, everyday rank and file workers rather than top-down party structures, translating Karl Marx's early essays into English for the first time. Working alongside Black labor leader Philip Randolph, she successfully organized the massive grassroots movement. Actually, I want to move to this. So that's the Johnson Forest tendency, is the name of her movement. Working alongside Black labor leader A. Philip Randolph, she successfully organized the massive grassroots movement that forced President Franklin D. Roosevelt to sign Executive Order 8802, legally banning racial discrimination in the defense industry. Moving to Detroit in 1953, she managed and edited The Correspondence, a radical newsletter written directly by workers, women, youth, and Black activists. For the next 40 years, alongside her husband, James Boggs, she became a pivotal architect for workers' rights, environmental justice, and civil rights, working with icons like Malcolm X and Angela Davis. Recognizing the economic destruction of deindustrialization, in 1992, she co-founded the legendary multicultural youth program, Detroit Summer. It mobilized youth to revitalize Detroit from the ground up through urban farming, public murals, intergenerational mentorship, and localized problem solving without waiting for the government's permission. She authored numerous foundational texts, including her autobiography, Living for Change. Her lifetime work culminated in the creation of the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center to nurture community leadership, which still serves as a premier global hub for training visionary leaders. What makes Grace so incredibly fascinating is that she approached the mechanics of social change completely differently from that of what people expected. Rather than hyper-focusing all her energy on national politics, electoral campaigns, massive corporate institutions, she directed her powerful intellect entirely towards local neighborhoods and grassroots communities. She spent her life asking beautifully simple, localized questions. How do neighbors actually work together at a block level? How do everyday communities creatively solve their own problems without waiting for permission? How do we develop the collective skills and imagination needed to build the future we actually want? And perhaps most profoundly, and what got me into the work I'm in today, what specific kind of human beings do we need to be in order to create a genuinely better society? Think about how fundamentally different that is from our current discourse. Most public conversations today are obsessed with policy tweaks, screaming about institutional failures. None of them ask, what can we do to be better? Now, Grace absolutely cared about policy. We spent hours arguing policy. But she possessed the philosophical wisdom to see that true systemic transformation requires real relationships. It requires active imagination. It requires open and vulnerable dialogue. She argued with fierce conviction that lasting change demands that we learn to see one another entirely differently, that we actively slow down to listen, learn, grow, build genuine, unbreakable trust. Today, we call them right relationships. Grace spent her entire life challenging people to step away from cheap, passive reaction and move boldly towards active, radical imagination. She pushed communities to stop merely shouting about what they were against and focus on what they're for. Her questions are just as vital and electric today as they were when Grace was organizing, although, honestly, still organizing at 100 years old when she died. But let's be honest, it is infinitely easier to point out problems than it is to imagine real solutions. It is easy to sit back and criticize. It is hard work to step up and create. It is easy to react with anger. It takes real grit to actively build community. Grace dared us to see ourselves not as helpless observers watching history happen on a screen, but as active, creative participants holding the pen. Change doesn't just show up in massive cinematic climaxes. It happens through small, intentional conversations. It happens through deep, localized relationships. It happens through everyday communities who are brave enough to imagine something better and do the patient, unglamorous, collaborative work required to turn that spark into reality. That kind of leadership rarely tracks on social media, but over time is the only thing that has ever really transformed the world. So we've pulled up a chair with these four extraordinary women from completely different cultural backgrounds, generations, and fields of play. A border-pushing journalist, a culture-shaping literary editor, a courageous indigenous preservationist, and a visionary grassroots philosopher. When we step back, the shared themes are undeniable. The first common thread is the power of story. Every single one of these women understood on a cellular level that stories construct our daily reality. Stories dictate exactly how communities perceive their own value, and they determine whose specific lived experiences are treated as essential or disposable. They can be used to reinforce calcified top-down power structures, or they can act as the ultimate spark to completely dismantle them. None of them looked at storytelling as passive pastimes or simple entertainment. They knew stories are tools, stories are bridges. They are the ultimate acts of human meaning making. The second core thread is intentional community. Not a single one of these women operated as an isolated lone wolf genius. Standard history loves to pitch the myth that real change is always the result of one single extraordinary hero acting entirely alone. But can we get rid of that myth, please? Real sustainable change is always a deeply collaborative game. It lives and breathes through relationships, tight networks, families, creative spaces, and collective movements. Every woman we explored today poured her life's energy into helping others find their footing and thrive. Their creative practices weren't driven by an ego trip for personal recognition. Grace actually hated when you recognized her. It was so funny. They were completely centered on collective growth and shared power. And the final thread is courage. Not the loud, theatrical kind of courage we see in summer blockbusters where we're just going to stand up to the man. No, it's a beautiful, quiet, stubborn style of courage. The courage required to just keep showing up day by day, to keep speaking your truth and creating your art, preserving your roots, and building your community, even when the institutional recognition is absolutely zero. It's the courage to keep creating when progress feels frustratingly slow and the final outcome is entirely uncertain. Or when you've been doing it for 30 years and everything's going backwards. All four of these hidden heroines champion a model of leadership that our wider society desperately needs to relearn. A leadership rooted entirely in radical service and wide open possibility. It's a leadership that never asks, how can I get more eyes on me? Instead, it asks, what can I bring to the table to contribute? That distinction is everything, because at the end of the day, the true measure of creative life isn't how many superficial strangers know your name. The true measure is how many real human lives are fundamentally different because you chose to step up and care. And by that metric, these women were absolutely extraordinary. I want to take a step back from the historical timeline on the screen and bring our focus entirely into this room and those of you on Zoom and into your own lives. Because the truth is, hidden heroines aren't just characters locked inside old history books. They're actively walking among us. They're sitting right next to you. I want to invite everyone here to close your eyes for a brief second and just clear the noise and picture one specific person who has had a deeply meaningful and transformative impact on your individual life path. Maybe it was that unforgettable teacher or patient mentor, a family member who anchored you, or a neighbor who looked out for you in your block, a creative colleague, a dedicated volunteer, or a friend who just showed up when everyone else bailed. Think about that one person who selflessly invested their time, their quiet wisdom, their raw care, or their creative encouragement into your journey. The one who deliberately carved out opportunities for you or simply made you feel completely seen and valued in a world that can feel incredibly cold? Take that moment and hold that face in your mind. What did they actually do for you? How did their quiet influence reshape your trajectory? Where would you be right now? And what parts of you, your own creative spark, would be missing if they had not been there to hold that space for you? When we talk about hidden heroines, we're talking about human beings whose real world influence completely breaks standard metrics. A single dedicated teacher can alter the creative destinies of hundreds of students over their career. A passionate community organizer can spark relationships and solidarity that anchor a neighborhood for decades. A parent or caregiver can instill profound values that cascade beautifully through generations. An artist or a crafter can fundamentally reframe how an entire group of people understand their own worth. The impact of these choices is massive, tangible force, and if it never hits even if it never hit a single newsfeed. What I love most about this perspective is that it radically democratizes our collective understanding of what makes human life significant. It stands as an absolute proof that you do not need an elite platform, a viral piece of content, a best-selling book, or a literal monument built in your honor to execute a life of profound significance. You only need one thing: the basic radical willingness to contribute something of real creative value to the human beings right in front of you. When we choose to widen our lens and reframe what power looks like, we start noticing spectacular acts of service, breathtaking creativity, and profound care happening all around us every single day. And when we start noticing them, we become infinitely more likely to honor, celebrate, and protect those people while they're still with us. One of the greatest tragedies of human memory is how often our recognition arrives entirely too late, long after the person has left the room. Imagine what would happen if we became absolute experts at noticing and naming people's value in real time. What if we started expressing our creative gratitude freely and wildly without reservation? What if we committed to fiercely telling and capturing those local stories while we still have the beautiful opportunity to do so? Those are the exact sparks worth carrying out of this room today. As we close our time together today, I want to bring our focus completely back to the four incredible women who brought us to this table in the first place: Jovita Idár, Jessie Redmon Fauset, Zitkála-Šá, and Lee Boggs. Each of them brought an irreplaceable, invaluable spark to this planet. Each of them dedicated their lives to helping other human beings find the courage to unlock their own unique voice. Each of them fought like hell to expand the horizon of opportunity for generations they would never live to see. And every single one of them stands as living proof that profound human influence has absolutely nothing to do with fleeting fame. Their extraordinary lives challenge us to look at history through a completely redefined lens. But more importantly, they challenge us to look at our own present reality with wide open, discerning eyes. And perhaps most thrilling, they force us to answer the question: what incredible stories are we actively helping to create together in this exact moment? Because history isn't just a dead thing that's already happened in the past. History did not end on December 17th, 1969, or pick a date. History is a fluid, living thing that is actively unfolding right now. It is happening every single day in our neighborhoods, in our creative groups, in our relationships, and in the intentional choices we make and communities in which we thrive. The stories that future generations will inherit are being written by us at this very table, turn by turn, page by page. The women we celebrate today prove that the most meaningful work on this planet almost always happens far from the glare of mainstream spotlight. They remind us that true leadership can look like the quiet art of teaching, or just practicing radical care for one another. Their ultimate legacy is the beautiful, liberating proof that everyday people possess extraordinary power to transform the lives of others, not through manufactured status and not through institutional fame, but through pure, unshakable commitment, fierce creative courage, radical imagination, and the powerful, beautiful stories we choose to tell each other. Thank you so much for spending your morning exploring these lives and sharing this space with me. I would absolutely love to open the floor and hear your own thoughts, your questions, your reflections. But start this conversation off. What hidden stories, or I want you to think about something. What hidden stories or local heroes in your own lives and neighborhoods do you think deserve a much bigger spotlight?
April, thank you so much. It was so timely. I mean, I needed to hear the story you shared with these women that this did the work. Thank you so much. We've got a comment from Gail right now. Anyway, but Myrna, yeah, Gail Myrna, thank you. And her comment is, not everyone has someone in their life to guide and inspire them as you have described. Can you react to that?
I think so often we focus on the now. And yes, right now you may not. But I feel like we all survived to whatever age we're at, and we wouldn't have done that alone.
Right.
Life is hard. And so I think while it might be hard to put a name on it, on the person, thinking about just a moment where you felt lost and looking for why you continued can often find that seed of the person, and it may not have been a person who specifically talked to you. It could just be something you read. It could be, I mean, Mahatma Gandhi and MLK both received a lot of their inspiration for their acts from a text that was written 1,000 years ago. So that person might not be someone who is specifically talking to you, but it could just be something that you've been inspired by, and that person still put it down.
I think I have an example, if I could share that. When I was a new therapist at the Oregon Burn Center, they threw me in over my head. I wasn't really knowing what I was licensed, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And my mentor had gone on vacation because she hadn't had a vacation in years because nobody wanted to work in the burn center. And there I was. And Dr. Philip Parsley, who was the founder of the Oregon Burn Center, ordered a splint for a patient, elbow extension splint, which isn't that hard to make. And I should have known how to do it, but I screwed up. And instead of ranting and raving and just sending me to like, what's wrong with you? He took me aside and said, Helen, that splint I asked you to make, I don't think it's working. The patient's in there picking his nose, and the splint was supposed to make him do this. And but he sent me back in to fix it. He sent me back in. He didn't say, get somebody that knows what they're doing. He sent me back in to fix it. And I cried. And poor Hal had to listen to my tears when I got home. But I went back and fixed it, and when Dr. Parsley would ever do a presentation, he always made the slide with the physician in tiny print and the staff in big print. He was just a dear, dear man. And when you're speaking today, I just thought that was Dr. Parsley. Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone have speaker number one? Here, questioner number one. Anne. Oh, no, we're putting up anybody. Okay, we'll start.
Anybody else who wants to ask a question, just raise your hand.
Actually, I don't have a question.
No, a comment. Or a comment.
No, I wanted to comment. I also was thinking about people that most of mine is my mother, but beyond that, when I first started working as a corporate travel manager, I went to the place that they told me I was going to be the boss of. And there was a woman there who was the boss there now. And she, rather than be upset at the fact that I'm taking her spot and all that sort of thing, she really welcomed me and gave me great insights as far as the staff went and the people around and the companies that we were at. It was so just wonderful to have that mentorship that it could have been just totally the opposite, because she was, it was like, you're getting my job and blah, blah, blah. And it was not that at all. And it was just a wonderful experience. That's my
Thank
story.
you. Yeah. I'm sure several others could think about it a minute and
Raise your hand if you'd like to share.
So
a story.
you all listened to me for 50 minutes, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you a story kind of in answer
Go
to
ahead.
that. So I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, pre-Vatican II. My Monsignor thought that Pope John Paul was the Antichrist. And I was struggling one day because, not surprisingly, the nuns didn't like me much because I asked too many questions. You don't become who I am today by being a good Catholic schoolgirl. And I was struggling, and the Mother Superior had pretty much written me off. And Monsignor sat me down and was like, "This is not the place for you." And at first I'm like, okay, that's not what you want to hear from you. I was 8, by the way. But he handed me a book and he said, "Read this and see what you think." It was Walden by Thoreau with Civil Disobedience. At 8. They did things like that to me. But I went home and I started reading it. And I'll be at 8, I didn't really necessarily get all the concepts. But something in me just was like, especially once I got to Civil Disobedience, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Screw the nuns. That really impacted me. Like, the Monsignor's belief in me, the Monsignor was an interesting one, because although he didn't like Vatican II, when I came out as queer, he was like, "Well, I'm not going to condemn you," even though during that time the church still was. He's like, "We teach conscious over church. Do you feel like you have in your relationship to God, do you still feel right in that relationship while having the identity you have?" And this was the things he did. So he was an amazing person because of the steps he kind of pushed me towards and had me asking questions. It wasn't much longer that he was actually our Monsignor, because some of the older individuals complained. But the book itself, Thoreau had been dead for, at that point, almost 100 years. But his writings really inspired me and really inspired the trajectory of how I took my life. Once you get past the inherent bias against the Irish, which, and the fact that he was a drunk who couldn't hold a job. And that's why he did Walden. But the core concepts that he was talking about, even that, he wrote them down. He wrote them down in a time period where it could have gotten him thrown in jail. It actually did, which is why Civil Disobedience got written. So I think that's it too, is like, it's not necessarily the tangible people, but it can also just be the people, our ancestors, are those who came before us, who can inspire us.
Go ahead.
So this may or may not be a question for you, but a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, it really reminds me of the kind of language that I remember was really strong going into the Women's March in 2016. And that was such an optimistic moment, the Women's March, it really was. And it feels like the whole thing kind of fell apart. And I don't understand why our collective organizing around these issues disintegrated the way that it did. And it doesn't seem like we've been able to pick up the spark since then. Is that an appropriate question for you? Okay.
So I'm going to fall on Dan Rather. Dan Rather, in his essays on, well, now I can't remember the name of his essays. His book on essays, it's basically the ties that bind us. And it's a series of essays about our similarities as opposed to our differences as Americans. And in that, he talks about how, and I'm going to paraphrase, about how power needs us not to be talking to each other. Power needs to divide us. Because if we are talking to each other, if we are connecting, we are more powerful than power is. And since 2016, since 2016, and I'm going to give a little aside. In 2016, I was a planning and policy analyst in public housing working on the Hill. In 2016, from 2015, basically from 2013 to 2018, I was a planning and policy analyst. In 2016, we see the intentional erosion of civil discourse. We see from Fox News, we see from social media, the start of a movement, including the introduction of Trump, and Reddit and all these other things. We start seeing those tools, which are tools that should have brought us together. Honestly, social media, Reddit, all those things should have been a way for us to stay together. Those tools are used to intentionally divide us, intentionally break up community movement. And what we found through various research is that social media, particularly when used as a collective ability to, as an ability to bring people together for collective change, the algorithm, if you want to call it the algorithm, that's giving it a nameless face. We're going to give them names. Bezos, Musk, Trump. We're going to give them names. They use those tools to break us up because the algorithm starts showing us things to make us not want to engage, to make us not want to engage with each other. They throw people into those spaces. We see it in when we actively protest too. People come in that aren't from that collective group and sow discord. They create violence so that's all the media shows. That's, I feel like, why the Women's March fell apart. And we're tired. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm tired. And so I think that's really where we start seeing the problems. And I think what we need to do is take a step back, take a deep breath, take care of ourselves. Pandemic didn't help, obviously. But I think it's more than that, because I think they have intentionally separated us and intentionally created a us versus them so that they can maintain power. And the way we fight that is by saying no, is by engaging with each other even when it's hard. And I am not saying, I just want to be clear, because one time I said that and someone thought, I'm not saying that you have to forgive or engage with your racist father who thinks that you're an evil person and threw you out of the house. I don't engage with my father. But find a commonality with someone who maybe is close, but not exactly where you're at. Not everybody is at the same place. Some people have been isolated. Some people are just coming to the table with those of us who have been screaming into the void. And so instead of saying, I told you so, let's say, okay, how do we join each other now? How do we come together now? And I won't say it's easy, because sometimes I just want to scream and be like, yeah, where have you been?
Is there someone else that wishes to share? Go ahead, Dave.
Your organization, StorySpark, how do people find out about your organization, and what motivates them to get involved in your organization? And are they just looking for help in writing some fictional story for fun, or are they all motivated like you are in making things a little better?
So it varies. So yes, all of the above. As far as people engaging, the so how do people find us? We're fairly new. We're a fairly young nonprofit. We're we're actually in August, we'll hit our 3rd year. And we just started doing events in March. We've done events here and there. Part of the reason people find me, especially in Vancouver, is because I spent 5 years working at the museum as an outreach and public programs manager. So I know a lot of people. But it's through me coming out and doing talks like this. You can find us on our website. We do have social media because while I will scream against social media, that is a way that people find out things.
Mhm.
But our events are designed, we have a broad spectrum of design. Sometimes it's just come and have fun. So our monthly game nights are literally just come have fun. We have D&D, we have board games, we have video games. Because at least then we can get people to the table with each other. Our last game was a retro game night, and we had I think he was a 67-year-old veteran, came in all gruff, full America gear. You know the guy. But he was sitting there with a 21-year-old, very obviously trans woman, playing video games and arguing over which old Sega Genesis game was the best one. And Friday, we had an event where this last Friday, we actually partnered up with an organization called Call to Love, which is an organization meant to bring the Christian community back to a center of love. And that means by affirming the LGBTQIA community. And we played the movie 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture. If you have not seen that, I really recommend it. It looks at how a mistranslation in 1946 actually created the LGBTQIA plus movement in Christianity.
Wow.
And that gentleman showed up. He showed up to the movie because he's like, I want to understand. I want to understand. And this is a guy who, like, when I was having conversations with him, I don't understand why they're allowing queer people into my building. I'm like, first of all, it's not your building. Second of all, you're talking to a queer person. But okay, let's have this conversation. But he came because he wanted to understand. So yeah, we do a lot of different things. Some people do just come to hang out. But even that's enough because you're getting introduced to new people. You're getting introduced to new ideas. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Now, where are you located?
So we're in Vancouver.
Vancouver.
So all our programming happens in Fourth Plain Community Commons, which is in the Fourth Plain corridor, down the street from Clark College. If you've driven down Fourth Plain, it's the giant building with the giant mural on it. We're in the community space downstairs. And we do that in partnership with Fourth Plain Forward. So they offer us the space.
That's very nice. Thank you. Thanks for asking that question, Dave. That was good. Anyone else? Oh, we have Kurt Mackey. Are there cultural signs of progress toward recognizing women's contributions?
I think, what culture are you talking about?
Yeah.
No, I think if we're saying, are there signs in the US of women contributions? I think in the day-to-day, yes. I think there's an intentional push by power to kill that.
Yeah.
So I do in my day job, I'm a DEI specialist. So diversity, equity, inclusion. I am the evil one. I know you're a brown, queer, equity specialist.
Yeah.
But I think so. I think I saw a lot of movement. I think that's why we're seeing the pushback.
Yeah.
I think the fact that I think two things have caused the, so in sociology and psychology, they talk about the extinction event. So when you're for example, coming out of addiction, when you're healing from addiction, there's a moment where you actually go way backwards before you actually come to healing. I think what we're seeing right now is that extinction event.
Wow.
I think what we're seeing right now is we put a black man in the White House, and we started putting women in power, and we started putting trans individuals and queer individuals in power. And what we're seeing now is that backlash. And our job now is not to let that backlash become an extinction event and come forward and fight back through voting, through getting together, through conversations.
Thank you. Just a real quick, Joyce Lackey says, I'm trying to think of a positive mentor out there right now who can inspire us to the positive in order to get through the negative of this current administration. She's thinking the Obamas are a good place to start.
And the Obamas are a good place to start. There's also, if we want to think more locally, or not locally, but like more grassroots, things like 1946.
1946.
So that's Kathy Baldich is the one who started it, started that research. So if we're talking about, because we can't separate what's happening right now from the religious, right?
Mhm.
They've ensured that. So I think there are actually some amazing creators, mostly on Instagram and Blue Sky, who are pushing back on this. But like, if we're looking at who's on television, I'm hard pressed to think of someone right now, honestly.
Okay. Albert, go ahead.
I'd like to ask you a question about the way we think of history. You know, we're all taught history, as you pointed out, with the great person theory of these are the people who made history, etc. If we dealt with history the opposite way of saying, well, people are all alike, and the people who made history are not really any different than most of the rest of us. We're all, say, cut from the same cloth at about the same level of potential. And there are just people who find circumstance throws them up into a position of tremendous power. I mean, you had one at Fort Vancouver, U.S. Grant, who was above a failure out there. Right?
He was a complete failure.
He's got his tomb in New York City on answer. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
And he was only a quartermaster at Fort Vancouver.
If you just try to change history upside down and get rid of all the ideas about greatness and being above and beyond, and just say we're all people trying to do the same thing, that maybe that would be the result of it. You know, some people think biography is great for history, but it tends to give you biography as part of history tends to give you this book about the great men, and I don't think we need that at all. I think we would do better if we would treat everybody in history as a human being with strengths and weaknesses. Like,
And I think that's critical. I think you're exactly right. I think that
Because here's the part. When we go with the great man, the lone wolf theory, what happens when we find out that they were just human?
Yeah, and they were.
We have it happening right here in Oregon right now, right?
Mhm.
Like Chavez, as an organizer, was a great man. And let's get real.
Mhm.
So is it Kant? No, I don't remember now. One of the great thinkers of the American Gothic movement said that it might have actually been Thoreau. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's been retranslated multiple times, and it wasn't an original idea when that came out either, right? With power, we often see the fallacies of human beings enhanced. The fall is much higher when we put them on pedestals.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get to a place where we have to acknowledge we don't have to forgive or accept the fallacies. I never will say that, but I think we have to understand that people are human. And they do great things, they do amazing things. They also do stupid things.
Yeah.
They do evil things. We are not perfect.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Michael, go ahead.
Expanding on what Alice just said, there's a great quote from Galileo when he was under house arrest and he was being visited by a friend. The friend asked him, what would be more tragic than a nation without heroes? And he replied, a nation that needs heroes.
Oh, boy, isn't that true, Michael?
Very good.
Wow, very good.
There's that.
There's also I think so white supremacy culture pays homage to the written word, right? The written word, if it's not written down, it never happened. Which is not which is a new phenomenon in the vastness of human culture.
Yeah.
I think getting away from that also would help. Like, just because it was written down doesn't mean it was right.
Right.
Just because it was written down doesn't mean it was accurate.
Right. Well, if we have time for one more comment, if anyone, yes.
One.
On that question of white representation in writing things down, there is a huge movement in self-publishing right now, which is getting a lot more voices out. But so many people become incredibly dependent on the massive industry of publishing that they don't know where to look for other voices. So where would you recommend people look for other voices?
So I would look locally. I would look at the small bookstore on the corner, around the alley. I would look at the local, particularly this area, we have so many phenomenal authors. I'd look at indie presses. So one of the things that StorySpark is beginning to do is we actually have our own press, and that's part of what we do, is that we're going to start publishing some of those books that aren't mainstream in order to provide this space. Our first one is actually coming out. I'm hoping to have it done today so that I can have it and start selling it at the Rainbow Walk on the 7th. And it's a story about the Frido, the altar for the Day of the Dead, and it's written in 3 languages. It's written in English, it's written in Spanish, and it's written in the author's native tongue, which if I try and say, I'm going to butcher, so I'm not. But is from the central Mexico area. It's one of the indigenous dialects. But that's what I would do, is I would look for the small publishers. I would look for the small presses. I'd get off Amazon.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there aren't some phenomenal self-published people on Amazon. I actually know several of them, and several who are, but Amazon's going to put everything else in front of your face.
Yeah.
They're going to put anything but. They're going to put Scholastic or Penguin or any of those before they let you see those indie publishers, unless they have complete rights to it, and then you might see it. Yeah, it's hard. I would also ask other people, particularly if you're looking in specific communities. Hey, what do you recommend I read? Or hey, what's the cool author that you've been reading recently? I think we need to get back to book clubs, honestly. Like actual book clubs. Like not we meet once a month and maybe we read the book clubs.
And you've given us some great titles, some authors that we should be looking at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, April, I want to sincerely thank you for your presentation today. It's given us all a lot to think about, and much appreciated the work you're doing in your group, your StorySpark, and thanks for the good fight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.